Chapter 49. What do you want? Meggery Sow. Again, reader, we must go backward before we can go forward. We must consider for a moment what had occurred with the rat and the serving girl and the princess down in the dungeon before Despereaux made his way to them. What happened was this. Roscuro led the Pea and Mig down into the deep dungeon to a hidden chamber, and there he directed Mig to put the princess in chains. "Gor," said Mig. "She's gonna have a hard time learning her lessons if she's all chained up like." "Do as I say," said Roscuro. "Maybe," said Mig, "before I lock her up, her and me could switch outfits, so we could start in already with her being me and me being a princess." "Oh, yes," said Roscuro, "certainly. A wonderful idea. Miss Meggery, Princess, take off your crown and give it to the serving girl." The Pea sighed and took off her crown and handed it to Mig, and Mig put it on, and it slid immediately right down her small head and came to rest quite painfully on her poor abused ears. "It's a biggish thing," she said, "and painful like." "Well, well," said Roscuro. "How do I look?" Mig asked, smiling at him. "Ridiculous," he said, "laughable." Mig stood, blinking back tears. "You mean I don't look like a princess?" she said to the rat. "I mean," said Roscuro, "you will never look like a princess, no matter how big a crown you put on your tiny head. You look exactly like the fool you are and always will be. Now make yourself useful and chain the princess up. Dress-up time is over." Mig sniffed and wiped her eyes, and then bent to look at the pile of chains and locks on the floor. "And now, princess," he said, "I'm afraid the time for your truth has arrived. I will now tell you what your future holds. You are consigned me to darkness, so I consign you to a life spent in the dungeon." Meg looked up. "Ain't you going upstairs to be a servant maid?" "No," said Roscuro. "Ain't I gonna be a princess then?" "No," said Roscuro. "But I want to be a princess." "No one," said Roscuro, "cares what you want." And as you know, reader, Meggery Sow had heard this sentiment expressed many times in her short life. But now in the dungeon it hit her full force. The rat was right. No one cared what she wanted. No one had ever cared. And perhaps the worst of all, no one ever would care. "I want," cried Mig. "Shh," said the princess. "Shut up," said the rat. "I want," sobbed Mig. I want." "What do you want, Mig?" the princess said softly. "Eh?" shouted Mig. "What do you want, Meggery Sow?" the princess shouted. "Don't ask her that," said Roscuro. Shut up, shut up." But it was too late. The words had been said. The question at last had been asked. The world stopped spinning, and all creation held its breath, waiting to hear what it was that Meggery Sow wanted. "I want," yes, shouted Pea. "I want my ma," cried Mig into the silent, waiting world. "I want my ma." "Oh," said the princess. She held out her hand to Mig. Mig took hold of it. "I want my mother too," said the princess softly, and she squeezed Mig's hand. "Stop it," shouted Roscuro. "Chain her up, chain her up." "Gor," said Mig. "I ain't gonna do that. You can't make me do that. I got the knife, don't I?" She took the knife and held it up. "If you have any sense at all," said Roscuro, "and I heartily doubt that you do, you won't use that instrument on me. Without me, you will never find your way out of the dungeon, and you will starve to death here, or worse." "Gor," said Mig. "Then lead us out now, or I will chop you up in little rat bits." "No," said Roscuro. "The princess shall stay here in the darkness, and you, Mig, will stay with her." "But I want to go upstairs," said Mig. "I'm afraid that we are stuck here, Mig," shouted the princess, "unless the rat has a change of heart and decides to lead us out." "There will be no changes of heart," said Roscuro. "None." "Gor," said Mig. She lowered the knife. And so the rat and the princess and the servant girl sat together in the dungeon, as outside the castle the sun rose and moved through the sky and sank to the earth again, and night fell. They sat together until the candle had burned out and another had been lit. They sat together in the dungeon. They sat and sat. And reader, truthfully, they might have be sitting there still if a mouse had not arrived. Princess! Despero shouted, Princess, I have come to save you. The Princess Pea heard her name. She looked up. Despero? She whispered, and then she shouted, Despero! Reader, nothing is sweeter in this sad world than the sound of someone you love calling your name. Nothing. For Despero, the sound was worth everything: his lost tail, his trip to the dungeon, back out of it and back into it again. He ran towards the princess, but Roscuro, baring his teeth, blocked the mouse's way. The princess cried, Oh no, Rat, please don't hurt him. He's my friend. Meg said, Don't worry, princess, I will save the Nisi. She took the kitchen knife and aimed to cut off the rat's head, but she missed her mark. Whoopsie, said Megariso. Ow! Screamed Roscuro. He turned to look at where his tail had been, and as he did, Despero drew his needle and placed the sharp tip of it right where the hearts should be. Don't move, said Despero. I will kill you. Ha ha ha! Botticelli laughed from the sidelines. Exactly. He slapped his tail on the floor in approval. Absolutely delightful. A mouse is going to kill a rat. Oh, all of this is much better than anticipated. I love it when mice come to the dungeon. Let me see, said the other rats, pushing and showing. Stand back, Botticelli told them, still laughing. Let that mouse do his work. Despero held the trembling needle against Roscuro's heart. The mouse knew that as a knight, it was his duty to protect the princess. But would killing the rat really make the darkness go away? Despero bowed his head ever so slightly, and as he did so, his whiskers brushed against the rat's nose. Roscuro sniffed. Wait, what? What is that smell? He asked. Mouse blood, shouted one rat. Blood and bones, shouted another. You're smelling tears, said Botticelli. Tears and thwarted love. Exactly, said Roscuro, and yet there's something else. He sniffed again, and the smell of soup crashed through his soul like a great wave, bringing with it the memory of light, the chandelier, the music, the laughter, and everything all in its, and all the things that were not, could never be available to him as a rat. Soup, moaned Roscuro, and he began to cry. Boo, shouted Botticelli. Hissed the other rats. Kill me, said Roscuro. He fell down before Despero. It will never work. All I wanted was some light. That is why I brought the princess here. Really, just for some beauty, some light of my own. Please, shouted Botticelli, do kill him. He is a miserable excuse for a rat. No, said Despero. No, Despero, said the princess, don't kill him. Despero lowered his needle. He turned and looked at the pea. Boo, shouted Botticelli again. Kill him, kill him. All this goodness is making me sick. I've lost my appetite. Gore, shouted Meg, waving her knife. I'll kill him. No, wait, said the princess. Roscuro, she said to the rat. What? He said. Tears were falling out of his eyes and creeping down his whiskers and dripping into the dungeon floor. And then the princess took a deep breath and put a hand on her heart. I think, reader, that she was feeling the same thing that Despero had felt when he was faced with his father begging him for forgiveness. That is, Pea was aware suddenly of how fragile her heart was, how much darkness was inside it. Fighting always with the light, she did not like the rat. She would never like the rat, but she knew that she must do to save her own heart. And so here are the words that the princess spoke to her enemy. She said, Roscuro, would you like some soup? The rat sniffed. Don't torment me, he said. I promise you, said the princess, that if you lead us out of here, I will get cook to make you some soup and you can eat it in the banquet hall. Speaking of eating, shouted one of the rats, give us the mousie. Yeah, shouted another, hand over the mouse. Who would want him now, said Botticelli. The flavor of him will be ruined, all that forgiveness and goodness. Blech. I, for one, am leaving. Soup in the banquet hall? Roscuro asked the princess. Yes, said the pea. Really? Truly, I promise. Gore, shouted Meg. Soup's illegal. But soup is good, said Despero. Yes, said the pea, isn't it? The princess bent down before the mouse. You are my knight, she said to him, with a shining needle, and I am glad that you found me. Let's go upstairs. Let's eat soup. And reader, they did. But the question you want answered, I know, is did they live happily ever after? Yes and no. What of Squirrel? Did he live happily ever after? Well, the Princess Pea gave him free access to the upstairs of the castle, and he was allowed to go back and forth from the darkness of the dungeon to the light of upstairs. But alas, he never really belonged in either place. The sad fate, I am afraid, of those whose hearts break and then mend in crooked ways. But the rat, in seeking forgiveness, did manage to shed some small light, some happiness, into another life. How? Squirrel Reader told the princess about the prisoner who had once owned a red tablecloth, and the princess saw to it that the prisoner was released, and Squirrel led the man up out of the dungeon to his daughter, Miggery Sow. Mig, as you might have guessed, did not get to be a princess, but her father, to atone for what he had done, treated her like one for the rest of his days. And what of Despero? Did he live happily ever after? Well, he did not marry the princess, if that was what you meant by happily ever after. Even in a world as strange as this one, a mouse and a princess cannot marry. But reader, they became friends. And they were. Together, they had many adventures. Those adventures, however, are another story, and this story, I'm afraid, must now draw to a close. But before you leave, reader, imagine this. Imagine an adoring king and a glowing princess, a serving girl with a crown on her head, and a rat with a spoon on his tail, all gathered around a table in a banquet hall. In the middle of the table, there is a great kettle of soup. Sitting in place of honor right next to the princess is a very small mouse with his big ears. And peeking out from behind a dusty velvet curtain, looking in amazement at the scene before him, were 4 other mice. Mon Dieu! Look, look, says Antoinette. He's alive, he lives. And he seems such the happy mouse. Forgiven, whispers Lester. Cripes, said Furlow. Unbelievable. Just so, said the Threadmaster. Hobbs, smiling. Just so. And reader, it is just so, isn't it? The end.